Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our virtual community meeting on the Central Business District Renewal and Expansion. And we have some more great turnout today, so I'm very pleased with that. It's good to see the level of engagement on these important topics, and I appreciate your attendance and your interest in learning more about what we're doing and why we're considering a renewal and expansion of the Central Business District. So again, ask you to stay muted. I have the ability also to try to take care of that, but sometimes it'll catch me by surprise as people join. If you'll just mute yourself upon joining, that'll be great, because I know we'll have people dropping in as well throughout. So again, appreciate the turnout and the level of engagement. I'm Barbara Coffey, Director of Economic Initiatives for the City of Tucson. But first, before I start our presentation and of the program today, I'd like to turn it over to Liz Soltero with Ward 1, Councilmember Lane Santa Cruz's office, to share a welcome and some opening remarks. Liz?
Thank you, Barbara. Good morning, everyone. My name is Liz Soltero. I'm here representing, along with Jasmine Rucker, from our office from Councilmember Santa Cruz, Ward 1. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to Mayor Romero and Councilmember Santa Cruz for asking for community meetings, and to Barbara and the Economic Initiatives team for hosting them. Thank you so much. So just really quickly want to share a statement on behalf of Councilmember Santa Cruz. While it is critically important that we target resources toward communities that have suffered from neglect and disinvestment from the city, we must also acknowledge that with new investment comes concerns about commercial and residential displacement. The neighborhoods surrounding the proposed expansion areas of the Central Business District need to be recognized as stakeholders in this decision-making process. At the very minimum, they need to be able to be at the table so that they can take full advantage of the new opportunities created by this expansion. We need to hear these concerns and comments, acknowledging that they are the experts of their own experience, and then we need to address those concerns. The COVID-19 crisis has impacted our community in many ways, including limiting access in what was already a tight housing market and dramatically impacting the livelihoods of our small business owners. We need to ensure that the expansion of the Central Business District provides ample benefits for those already invested in our community, and that it does not primarily benefit large commercial developers and out-of-state investors. By focusing on the community, focusing on their needs, and developing leadership among the residents to advocate for their own needs, we stand a much better chance of navigating the economic crisis we are in and planning for a more equitable future. So on behalf of Councilmember Santa Cruz, thank you all for participating.
Excellent. Thank you, Liz, and thanks everyone again. Thank you for those who are just now joining. And again, I'm asking just mute yourself, and as we have a large number of attendees today, but that's a good thing. So just also to start today, I wanted to recognize a few folks that have been a pivotal part of our work. And so let me do that now. Some of them may be here with us today, but I just want you to know their names and understand that this was a team effort, and it takes a lot of folks to look into initiatives like this. So again, thank you to Kevin Burke, our Deputy Director, Economic Initiatives, Mike Chakowski, Project Manager, Economic Initiatives, Roy Lusk, Principal Assistant City Attorney, Ann Chineka, Deputy Director, Housing and Community Development, Corin Manning, Planning Administrator, Planning and Development Services, Allison Miller, Lead Planner with Housing and Community Development, Nick Ross, Lead Planner, Planning and Development Services, Lauren Seamus, Planner, Housing and Community Development, and Teresa Noon, Community Outreach Program Manager with Pima Community College. So again, thank you everyone. Thank you. The team has been phenomenal, and they're here to help us answer questions as well, and we'll respond to questions even after today. So please make sure that you do correspond with us, and I'll make sure that you have our contact information to do that. So now I'm going to share my screen and get us started in our presentation. So you will be seeing our full slides here in a moment. All right. So to get us started, again, we've shared some introductions. We're going to walk through a few things, and then what we'll do is we'll take questions at the end of the formal presentation, and I'll have a team helping me watch those questions. You are welcome to enter those in the chat box, and we'll get to those, and then we'll also at the end, ask for any other questions that you might have verbally, and so we can have a good dialogue today. So with that, just a little background on the Office of Economic Initiatives and my role here. I joined the team basically a year and a half ago now. It seems like longer. It's been certainly an interesting year this year, but I'm very glad to have made the trip to Tucson and taken the position here with what is a great team and a great city. And so I just say that because economic development is a career for me, and I have been in other locations, other states. I have been most recently in Henderson, Nevada, but also in Texas and Georgia. And this is a return to Arizona for me. I was in Goodyear, Arizona from 03 to 09. So just a little background there. I like to run a comprehensive economic development program. So here at the city, we're working in all areas of business attraction, business retention and expansion, small business and entrepreneurial development. And then we also handle the initiatives of annexation as well. So again, contact information, and we're happy to put that in the chat room towards the end of the meeting as well. But myself, Kevin, and Mike are happy to answer questions on anything that you may have today or following today about any of the topics related to economic development. So now for this meeting, the important information. Let's start with definitions and legal requirements about the Central Business District. What exactly is it? So by state statute, Central Business District means a single and contiguous geographical area that's designated by resolution of the local governing body. The Central Business District may not be more than 2.5% of the total land area of the city, and it's also constrained by some geographical requirements in statute. It may not be more than twice as long as it is wide. Now, if you'll notice in the map before you, let me point out a couple of things. The green boundary is our existing Central Business District. Created in 2012. As you can see, the bottom bullet on the slide in front of you, April 17th, 2012 was when the mayor and council adopted the Tucson Central Business District by resolution. The area that you see in blue is the proposed, it includes the existing area that's bounded in the green boundary, but it also includes the proposed expansion area. And what I will tell you about that is that we had about, I want to say 1.4% in the original district, and we were allowed to, by statute, increase that to 2.5% of the city's total planning area to form what is the proposed Central Business District. So that's what you see in terms of expansion. The Central Business District is also an area that the city has determined meets definition of a slum area where sound municipal growth is substantially arrested. And we'll talk more about that and what that means in a moment. So what is a slum area? It's defined by a predominance of buildings or improvements, whether residential or non-residential, and that the public health or safety of welfare is threatened because of any of the following: the presence of dilapidated, deteriorated, aging, or obsolescent buildings or improvements, inadequate provision for ventilation, light, air, sanitation, or open spaces in the area, overcrowding, and the existence of conditions that endanger life or property by fire or other causes. So that is in the statute as the definition for slum area. And I like to point out and call your attention to this, the predominance of that physical evidence of that. It does not by any means mean that every property in the district is exhibiting those characteristics. That, of course, you know, is not true, right, given our own Central Business District and its existing makeup. So what is the purpose of the Central Business District? Well, Arizona state statute allows local government the authority to abate property tax for up to 8 years if a property is located within a designated central business district and meets other specific criteria. So that tool that allows for that 8-year property tax abatement you may have heard reference to is the government property lease excise tax, or as we say, GPLET. Some say GPLET, but that sounds a little much like Thanksgiving dinner. So we say GPLET here in Tucson, but that's just another acronym, and as governments like to do. The GPLET allows the city to facilitate or encourage development of real property in the central business district by providing a financial incentive to projects that would not be economically feasible, but for the value realized through that property tax abatement. And again, I like to point to the but for, because again, we are always looking at opportunities to attract investment where it otherwise might not happen on its own or happen soon enough that we're trying to cause or advance the job creation and economic impact that comes with projects. And I want to point out that we're focused when we use this tool, and it is a discretionary tool. I'll talk more about that as well, but we're using it in terms of commercial activity. This is not an opportunity to transform residential neighborhoods. This is not about any of that. It is about looking for opportunities that would be a benefit to the city and that help create jobs and capital investment. And it is so the GPLET is an opportunity for incentivizing, but again, I also will point out that we never award an incentive more than what the benefit or the direct benefit to the city would be from a project. So that direct benefit has to be greater according to the policies that our mayor and council have set. So let's keep going. I was jumping around. So let's talk about what it's not for just a moment. I'd like to, make sure that you see the flip side here. A central business district does not take the place of current city zoning ordinances or regulations. And it does not, as I mentioned before, signify that every or any individual property in the district is blighted. Again, it's just that predominance of physical evidence of those buildings or structures that are deteriorating. It does not affect or modify any historic preservation zone, and it does not affect any neighborhood's historic designation. So those of you that may represent some of those neighborhoods, it is not something that is going to interfere with those designations. So here we go again, jumping around. Next steps and other considerations to be aware of. So what we're looking at as we engage here with you in these community meetings is the movement towards September 9th, when mayor and council would consider the renewal and expansion of the central business district. After that point, we would talk more about our GPLET policy. We've already begun revising our process around application for our GPLET incentive, and so I'll also reference that further as we talk. Other government entities, you should know, including Renewal, also have the ability to enter into GPLET agreements. If it's in the central business district, it still does require the city's approval, though, for that 8-year tax abatement. But you can authorize, by state statute, in other words, a government property lease excise tax agreement can be set up anywhere in the city, again, governed by state statutes and with a lease rate that is determined by the state. Use of the GPLET tool is also at the absolute discretion of mayor and council, and if a proposed project does not meet the intent of our policy or meet our goals and desires for development in an area, the city does not have to enter into that agreement. So I wanted to point that out, that as economic developers and as your local elected officials, we're always looking for the best possible outcomes and the best projects. And we wouldn't bring forward a project that we didn't think was desirable. But further, with our new policy in terms of how we move forward with applications for the GPLET incentive, we are also engaging our neighborhoods and community members at the outset. long before we are going to see these on council agendas. So moving forward, we will have a neighborhood engagement component. We've actually already started utilizing that process. If you recall, earlier this year, we had a project come forward with One South Church. As an example, we held a neighborhood meeting in February right before the pandemic descended upon us, but we were able to hold that meeting and talk about the proposed renovation at our tallest office building in downtown, and the proposed project that includes hospitality and an office renovation at that site. So again, that's an example of how we are moving forward with neighborhood meetings well in advance of council considerations. So to date, the city has entered into 25 GPLET agreements. So since 2012, as I mentioned, when the Central Business District was first adopted, so there are a number of those, and I'll actually take a moment and show you some of that. Here we go again. I'm going to share a different screen to do that. So let's go here. So this is all on our website too. You can access these resources through connecttucson.com. We're very excited to have stood up a standalone economic development website for the city, and that way it's easy for you to see all of our resources, business and resources for development there. So again, the property tax abatements and GPLETs that have been issued through the city are shown here with a nice little map, and then actually takes you through some of the projects that you recognize. So for example, the Herbert on 12th Street downtown was one of our GPLET projects, and as you can see, we show the numbers here and the impact, so the revenues of the impact, and then that the project created, and the value of
Barbara, pardon my interruption.
Yes.
We're having some audio issues. I'm not sure if it's everyone, but
okay.
Perhaps if you turn off your video for a minute while you're sharing, that'll give us a little more bandwidth.
Okay. So I don't know if I can do that while recording though, just FYI. But it is saying my speaker is not working. Why is that? Okay, hold on. I'm going to make a change. Are we still having trouble hearing me, Kevin? Kevin?
It's good right now, but it
right.
still has been a little bit choppy, and we had some comments from others that they were experiencing it as well.
Okay, I'm going to keep going then, and I'll just try to move more
Great.
quickly. All right, so we've got projects like the Cadence on East Congress. Oh, I hope that you're still able. I'm just afraid if I do something, I may lose everyone, but I'm going to disconnect this. It may jump a minute, Kevin, so hopefully I don't lose anyone with this going on. I'm disconnecting the VPN. All right, is that any better? Not really, huh? All right, so I'm going to just roll through some of the projects. You recognize Mr. Car Wash, also downtown. Again, of course, all of these are going to be in the Central Business District. The BP Annex on Congress Street. Brother John's is also included here. So you recall that renovation. So just a place for you to see, of course, the AC Marriott Hotel in downtown, one of the first new hotels built in Tucson, downtown in a long time. The Trinity on University. The Tucson just opened in July this year. So that gives you a sampling. And so I'll go back to our PowerPoint. So the goal is to think about using the creation of the Central Business District as a way to revitalize, to continue the work that was started in 2012, the fact that there's still work to be done, and that it is to continue driving that investment and reinvestment into the Central Business District area. And to counteract any other conditions that are sometimes associated with areas that are our oldest areas of the city, and that are falling into decline or deteriorating. So I'm going to try to check and see how things are going. Okay. I'm going to rely on Kevin too to help me answer questions. So if you'll just keep watching that chat room. But the goal is to continually bring all areas of the city up. We don't want any one part of the city to be continually falling into decline or being, not being left sort of to the margins in terms of its maintenance and its consideration. And so it's often in every community, if you look across the country, to be found that folks are working very diligently in their oldest parts of the city to keep them coming up as cities grow and expand and new areas and new suburban areas come into play. You want to be sure that you're focusing enough energy in those areas that are the oldest in your community. So, are we required to renew the Central Business District? Yes, state statute requires a renewal and expansion of the Central Business District by October 1st for us in Tucson. So we would either renew, modify, or terminate the designation. Mayor and Council previously provided direction earlier last year to expand the boundary of the existing Central Business District in order to take advantage of that maximum allowable area, the 2.5% of the city's total planning area, as I mentioned when we started. We talked about how we use the GPLET and what that 8-year tax abatement means. And so what I'm going to show you now, and we'll come back to the map in a minute actually. What I want to do is give you a sense of how we determine and meet that definition of blight, of slum and blight, in order to establish the district. And we create a findings of conditions report, but that report comes only after a very thorough, what I call windshield survey of the physical conditions in the area. So here's what I wanted you to note, that there are over 4,600 parcels in the entire Central Business District that's proposed. And again, most of those properties date back to the 1960s. So again, you can see that there are residential properties included, but again, that's not our focus in terms of driving economic impact and job creation. So the land uses in the proposed expanded Central Business District also shown here. And I want to point out the large blue, the tallest darker blue bars represent the commercial and industrial land uses in the district. And then the rust color and the olive green color are those tax exempt and government properties. So again, that's more of the focus in terms of what we're looking at when we think about attracting reinvestment and commercial development. When there are code violations and crime data, that's also part of that contributing factor to the creation of the district in terms of meeting the slum and blight definition. And what I'd like you to note here is that when we analyze crime data from January 2013 to February of this year, we see that 11% so the crimes, those part 1 and 2 crimes, account for almost 11% of the city totals for these crimes. So think about 2.5% of the total planning area, but 11% of the crimes in this regard. And then interestingly, 34% of all the commercialized sex crimes occur in this area. So there's work to be done. Code violations, also just showing the percentages of those as it relates to this rest of the city, almost 13% in building safety, and then 12%, almost 12% in fire safety code violations. The next in green is vacant structures and so on. So again, just more of the data to support the findings of conditions. So what's the process for renewal and expansion? Here's where we were in May of 2019 when Mayor and Council discussed directing staff to pursue an expansion of the boundary and to go through the windshield survey, and a great thanks to our housing and community development partners who helped really boots on the ground, did the field work, took a lot of photos because, as you know, pictures are worth 1,000 words. We documented both written and photographically the evidence of blight in these areas. So we did that from late 2019 to early this year, created the findings of conditions report, which is also on our website at connecttucson.com. And then we're now in the community meeting stage. and September 9th would be the consideration of the resolution to reauthorize the expansion, if that's what we do. So with that, let's see if we can get questions answered. And I'm going to stop the sharing here so I can focus on the questions coming in and make sure that you can hear me as well. So.
Barbara, there's a question in the chat box from Nick. And his question is whether we have considered removing some areas from the central business district, and he specifically cited 4th Avenue.
The question is about removing, if there is that?
The question is whether or not we had considered removing some areas from the central business district, such as 4th Avenue, that have already, in his question, seen a lot of redevelopment.
Okay, so this goes back to the state statute, and Kevin, please tell me if you can hear me okay. I really need your thumbs up or something. This goes back to the statute requirement of how the geographical requirements are in order to create district. And the slide I showed early on when we talked about it has to be twice as long as it is wide. These are important considerations in the way the district looks. And so that made it a challenge in some ways for us to take in certain areas or to take out certain areas, depending on where we're trying to achieve the greatest impact for addressing the blighted areas. So while an area may be included, it may not be that, again, there may not be much work to do on a certain street or two, but it is, again, the overall district that we're looking at in terms of the preponderance of the physical evidence of blight. So I hope that helps. Let's look at, I'm going to go back up to the top here and try to get, okay. So early on, I think we had scheduled an hour and a half. So, but we're going to go until we get questions answered. Let's see. All right. So there's a question about, and I'm reading comments too from Elizabeth. Not all old areas of the city are falling into decline. That's correct. Not all areas are. And again, that speaks to a great community and property owners, and just again, general care for the community and the neighborhoods. Sloan has said designating any area as slum or blighted will surely affect property values, whether or not that meets the criteria described in the report. That's a statement, I suppose. Ken is sharing some
Barbara, Lee Marsh has his hand up in the chat room, and so perhaps if you wanted to call on him. Okay.
I just feel like I should get through a lot of these questions. Can you, let's see. Let me see if I have to open participants. And you said it was Lee, all right.
Correct.
And I will unmute. Lee, do you want to share?
Yeah, I had a question. I was wondering if there's any sort of documentation of the algorithms or the protocols that are used to generate the economic analyses reports that are used to justify the GPLET projects. I've looked at a few of those, and it seems to me like they don't really describe those methods, and there aren't really like sources provided for the data. So I think that would help us kind of understand how these projects are justified in terms of providing more economic output than what's being taken.
So your question is related to the economic impact analysis that we do for our GPLET incentive program. We use a third party, Applied Analysis. Their specialty is economic impact analysis. We make sure that it's third party so that it is not an internal process. So, you know, their reputation is behind their findings, and they look at economic indicators that relate to the kinds of taxes that will be generated by the project, the kind of payroll that will be generated, and the payroll spend. In some cases, the visitor expenditure that goes into. that is part of the project. And then, so all of those things are economic impact pieces that would, that play into determining. But just so you know, our mayor and council has been very focused on making sure that we pull apart just direct revenues. So that would be sales taxes and property taxes to the city, and that our GPLED incentive would not be greater than the direct revenues to the city of Tucson. So let's going back to
Barbara, there was a question in the chat room, well, several comments and a question with regard to affordable housing. And so I think maybe you could speak about whether or not the CBD and the GPLET tool can be used to facilitate affordable housing development.
So that's, so absolutely. So Kevin, I mean, you've got a great response here. I'm gonna pull this up. There's nothing preventing the city from using the GPLET tool to facilitate development of affordable housing. So that's the answer there. It is, you've seen the projects that have created some different types of housing throughout the central business district since 2012 when we had first created and started to use the GPLET tool. And there's no reason why those residential or housing or mixed use projects could not include an affordable housing component. And I'm going back through again questions in the chat room, unless Kevin that you're directing me to that we've answered some of those. There's comments about armored.
Yeah, Roy and I have been going back and forth trying to keep up. It's tough when you read through from the top because some of our responses take a while. They're a little bit further down.
Okay.
So the most recent question from Shannon and Kat, let me read Kat's question.
Okay.
Restate the name of the third party that addresses the economic impact for the GPLETs, and that company is Applied Economics in Phoenix. And I'll pull up, or Mike, maybe if you could just throw the link to the Applied Economics website in here for Kat. Shannon asks, what type of protections will be in place for legacy businesses in the opportunity zone? And we just don't want to confuse terms, obviously, Barbara, but the opportunity zone being one thing and what we're talking about here with the central business district, maybe you could address that question.
Right. So, you know, the question about legacy businesses, so I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, is that we would perceive, you know, we're looking at supporting projects that are meaningful in terms of economic impact, but that are also desirable, right? So again, there is no interest in displacing legacy enterprises or, you know, legacy activities. There is not, you know, an interest in doing away with anything. Okay, so what this allows us to do is continue to take advantage of opportunities as they come that would help in terms of enhancing the overall opportunity to revitalize an area. So think about when we have vacant buildings or you know, businesses and buildings that have been dark, where businesses have gone out and maybe sat vacant for years. I can tell you the downtown as an example, the Hotel Arizona is an example where it's been vacant for almost a decade. And now we're seeing HSL Properties come in and look at a rehab for that hotel that will bring you a Hyatt Regency flag that is a full service with spa and some office component. And, you know, so being able to take advantage of an opportunity when it arises, that's a perfect example of why having a central business district designation is in place. So it is not about taking anything away in terms of legacy enterprises. So there were questions about I'm still scrolling through. Distinguishing, Nick had asked, and maybe we answered that, distinguishing between the central business district and the slum designation. Again, the slum designation is a requirement. That's why the state is basically saying, with the crafting of this statute, right, and the ability, enabling local governments to create central business district, is because they want to be able to help cities revitalize the very core of their community, the historical, significant core commercial centers of the state. So that's what it's tied to. So they are related. Let's see. What else? Has your department considered removing any areas? I think we talked about that because of the geographical challenges. I know Roy has answered some things on that. Does crime number take into account population density? Well, certainly density, more activity begets more activity in many ways. So it would, it's possible that yes, in more dense areas where there's more population in a more compact area, there might be more instances of activity. That could be true. Given that the central business district would satisfy requirements without enclosing any part of Armory Park, I don't know if there was a question in that, but I will tell you that that we didn't want to have to include residential areas, but we couldn't meet the geographical arrangement required by the statute without forming it in that way. So some areas, while there are some corridors or areas that are more residential, it's really the commercial. I go back to the commercial nodes through those areas that we're looking for, that we know would help create these enlivened areas of activity so that you have the kind of amenities and opportunities to walk to work and walk to the store and create active spaces so that you don't have dark spaces or broken windows. I like to also go back to thinking about, why we work a lot with public safety, and they talk a lot about the broken windows theory. And we know that if we clean up areas, and if we remove the graffiti, and if we clean up our trash and we take the boards off the windows, that a place looks more vibrant and is less likely to attract the negative activity. So part of it is that as well. And so again, I go back to the goal of revitalizing and enhancing. That's what we're talking about. So the argument there will be no change after the central business district is expanded is disingenuous. Ken says there will be no immediate change, but in a neighborhood like Armory Park, we must take the long view. Change is the purpose of the central business district expansion. So I guess my comment back to that is similar to what you just said, is that we're really not looking to change the neighborhoods. We're not looking at change in your residential areas. We're trying to be open. It's a tool that enables us to be open to assisting development that's positive. So crime data relates directly to City of Tucson decisions about how to allocate its resources, not characteristics that are indigenous to a geographic area. That's a comment from Elizabeth. Phyllis asks, she says, the numbers are for a large area. Can it be narrowed down to neighborhoods? I think there is a granular level that our crime data can get to. I apologize that we don't have that for you today. But you could reach back out if you are interested. I'm sure I can reach out to our friends in GIS and with the police department who do analytics, that they might be able to give you some numbers that you're looking for.
That's correct, Barbara. I would chime in just for a second there to say that we did work very closely with the police department to use their data and tailor it to the boundaries of the proposed central business district. And of course, the central business district doesn't adhere to census block boundaries or to neighborhood boundaries. So it was a little bit of a challenge to tease some of that data out. If you want information about crime rates specifically for your neighborhood, the police department has that data, and we can help get access to that for you if you're interested.
Kevin, there's also a question from Betty about how many of the pictures showing blighted conditions were actually located on Stone or 6th Avenue between Congress and 19th Street. Again, we didn't take a picture of all 4,600 parcels, okay? So that would have been a challenge. What we took a picture of was the evidence of blight that we could find. So it's possible, right, that in some areas, you know, again, on some streets, there weren't images of that because it didn't exist. So I go back to, it's that predominance or preponderance of physical conditions that meet that definition. Given that the Central Business District would satisfy the requirements, why is Armory Park neighborhood included? Again, I talked about that in terms of how we had to look at the geographical ability to not be twice, it cannot be twice as long as it is wide. And Roy, feel free to jump in if you have anything to add on the geographical constraints related to statute. And here, I think Roy put a good answer in the chat room. Let's keep going. There's some conversations.
Barbara,
yes.
I had a question going back, you know, so I've heard this predominance. I think it's kind of sounds like something that I've been hearing within the Armory Park community as far as confusion, because people are saying their neighborhood and they're like, how did this happen? Like, look, here's this report that shows a lot of beautiful buildings. And so, like, I mean, I know that there are some properties that could be revitalized, certainly. And I just think, you know, what I've been kind of gathering is from that Arizona statute that this predominance is a bit ambiguous. And so, and since there isn't like a clearly defined, like within a block radius, 50% of the structures are blighted in some way, you know? So I guess,
Yeah.
so with some of my questions that I've been having in there are trying to understand that a bit more, because I think it might help some of the people in the Armory Park neighborhood understand how these are going. Is it just like, you know, because I can understand like there's a little bit of bias coming in of, hey, there's this building here, you know, so just to maybe remove some of that uncertainty.
I appreciate that. And the challenge is we only have what state statute writes as a way to interpret not only how to create this district, but then how to protect it from, you know, any vulnerabilities, right? To make sure that our findings of condition are appropriate. That's why the city attorney's office plays a huge role in that. They make sure that when we go out and we're taking a look at the area and when we start defining that boundary, that we are creating it in accordance with what statute requires. And if statute doesn't have any of those other specifics, then it makes it difficult for me to help further clarify for you, right? So you're right. There is an amount of interpretation in terms of how we do that. Roy, any thoughts to add?
I guess one clarification I would say ask for on that is like I understand like local governments have, you know, you can't like conflict with what a state statute has, but like locally you could say, okay, well, we meet these requirements, and then as a city, or, you know, we're going to put forth these guidelines so that, you know, as we start to undertake these projects, we could be like, well, this is how we're going to define moving forward. These meet the criteria of the state statute, and then we're enhancing that based on our definitions and understanding of our local community and the fabric of it.
Yes. So that goes back to our changes that we've made to our GPLED application process. So again, I talked a little bit about the neighborhood engagement piece and making sure that what we're creating are win-win opportunities. And we do that by reaching out, we're almost notifying people within a radius similarly to how they do for a zoning action. So we're following that same protocol where we also notify the neighborhood associations within the 1 mile. So we make sure that we're having conversations ahead of time. As you recall, there have been instances where we have created community benefits agreements between developer and the developer and the neighborhood, and that is still also encouraged in our new application process. And so we are actually assisting folks with those kinds of discussions right now. When we think about the former Regal Inn, for example, it has gone through community meetings and is discussing community benefits agreements for that purpose. So again, so that we're seeing projects that do have positive impact all the way around, and to minimize any negative outcome, right? And I just don't. So I don't think. I think the other piece that is going to help us put our own layer, as you said, of policy in place for that is a scoring mechanism that we've also included in our new GPLET application process, so that if developers are going above and beyond with things, so not only with things like a community benefits agreement, but maybe are adding more open space or public space amenities or public art, or doing some other kinds of enhancements to the project, then we consider that a favorable opportunity. And so they would be looked upon, again, reviewed more favorably as well. I also go back to the discretionary piece, that again, mayor and council do not have to approve an incentive. If someone can come that is located in the central business district, bring their project forward, but if it is not desirable, if it does not meet the intent of what we're hoping to achieve with good quality development, then we do not have to approve an 8-year property tax abatement.
Barbara, if I could, just for
Yes.
a second, let me sort of jump into how legally how we got here. So the under Arizona state law, in order to have a GPLET tax abatement, you have to have a central business district, which is also you have to have which is why you also have a slum and blight designation. That slum and blight designation and the central business district business district itself actually only lives within the GPLET statute. There's nothing else anywhere in Arizona law that says that you have to have a central business district. So it's really only related to that GPLET incentive. One way to think about it is, it's just sort of a hoop that we have to jump through in order to do these kinds of developments. It doesn't require us to do developments. It doesn't require us to do them in any particular way.
Right.
They're all subject to mayor and council approval, and they're not by right. So if a developer wants to come into any community within the city of Tucson, they have to get approval by the mayor and council. So, are you guys not hearing me? Is that better? Barbara, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay,
it's a little muted, but I can hear you. Yeah.
Let me get a little closer. Anyway, getting back to what I was saying, there's nothing required in order to have a GPLET other than these particular complying with these particular statutes. And this statute in particular requires that we do this year by October. So what it says is that you have to renew or reevaluate or redefine your central business district and slum designation by October of this year. And so that's why we've sort of started this process. Now it's obviously appropriate that everyone has a sort of stake in it. The difficulty though is that as someone already said in the chat, these are loaded words, right? Slum and blight are loaded words. They really don't have any function other than for economic initiatives. It doesn't have any other function than to get this done. And in terms of redlining and those sorts of things, that has not been the experience of economic initiatives or the city of Tucson. In the 8 years prior, in the areas that we've had a central business district, which you can see on the map, there's been no redlining or anything like that. And in fact, only the property values have only gone up from 2012, I guess, to 2020. Obviously, that's a function of the economy as well, of course. But more importantly, all of these projects going forward, once we designate a central business district, all the projects going forward are still subject to all the same review, all the same approvals, all the same mayor and council interventions that are available now, including things like community benefits agreements, if the community feels that that's the case, and including talking about projects that may not be appropriate for a particular historical reason or for a particular character of the neighborhood. None of this requires any development whatsoever. It's just a tool that allows that development in particular areas. To give an example of some where it might be helpful, which I think when people think about development, they think about large developers coming in and sort of building high rises and whatnot. And there are particular areas where it makes sense to provide development incentive to actually retain the historical character and perspective, like for example the Tucson Cursillo or the Tucson Center for Performing Arts. That particular project would not have happened and would not be available for preservation if we didn't have a tool like the GPLAT. The GPLAT allows us to provide incentives for someone to develop a property that there's nothing economically beneficial about the property, but it's an important historical property that needs to be preserved and is going to require quite a bit of renovation, and that benefit, that economic incentive allows for that renovation.
Right. Thanks, Roy. Yeah, it does help some of those projects that you want to have happen get over the hump, right? It gives that opportunity. I want to appreciate Elizabeth's comment and feedback, more emphasis on small neighborhood scale business and projects, less on large redevelopment. I think that it's an important balance, and certainly we work with planning and zoning to get the right mix of things to happen in the appropriate areas. I want to go back to Sloan's, question about property values. Will they be negatively affected by the designation? And as Roy said, property values continue to increase. And what I'd like to tell you is that the idea of removing blight, that the reason we go to work and revitalize areas, that ultimately creates property values to stay healthy, right? So, and rise. And people take that, the good and the bad, right? Some don't want those values to go up and some do. So that's, I can't speak for how tax assessing works. That's the county's job, but I can tell you that we all want to live in a neighborhood we're proud of, and eliminating deteriorating and blighted conditions help us feel better about our area. And it helps the surrounding areas. I will also mention that when we improve the core, it radiates outward to the areas outside the central business district and helps create, that improvement just generates outside. It radiates like dropping a pebble in the pool of water, and you see it. It has its impact in a positive way going out. And so those improvements would continue, and your core would get stronger. And again, that's how it works. We talked about let's see, I'm looking here too.
Barbara, I'd like to go back to a question that Shannon asked about the community benefit agreements. And I think her question was whether or not community benefit agreements will be required as a part of the CBD approval process. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to make the distinction between this item, which is the renewal and expansion of the central business district designation, and what you were mentioning a few minutes ago about the proposed GPLET policy and how we actually implement the GPLET tool, right? So strictly speaking, to directly answer Shannon's question, no, as a part of the CBD renewal process, we're not looking to specifically require that future GPLET projects have a community benefits agreement, right? Want to separate the issue of the CBD reauthorization. What we're proposing is a revised policy for the use of the GPLET tool. And what we've included in that revised policy is, and I believe you mentioned this, Barbara, a scoring matrix where the developer would accrue points, right, for his project. And some of the points available would be for entering into a community benefits agreement. And that would be essentially a agreement between the developer on one hand and the neighborhood association or neighborhood associations on the other hand. That agreement actually the city would not be a party to that agreement. That's what we've proposed.
Okay, great. I want to go back to also, Shannon, asked again just to address the opportunity zone. So opportunity zones were established, a federal established in the last 2 years. We have a number of areas that were approved as opportunity zones in our community. We have that on our interactive maps. You're welcome to, and maybe Mike can drop that link in as well if people want to look at what and where opportunity zones are in Tucson. That'd be great. You can also find it on connecttucson.com, but I think Mike can drop a link in that would answer questions for whether your property's in an opportunity zone. And what that means, basically, in a real short answer on that, is that that qualified opportunity funds are able to make investments in designated opportunity zones, and so therefore help development to occur in those areas, and the investor gets a tax deferral for that investment. So it's really about attracting equity investment into projects in areas that were designated, which in order to be designated, they had to be low to moderate income areas. So
Barbara, we should be really clear about the Opportunity Zone program, that is in no way, shape, or form a city program. It's the Department of the Treasury, and there are no local taxes involved.
That's right. It is not a local program.
There are a bunch of comments with regard to the west end of the Armory Park neighborhood, and specifically the area that has been identified for the expansion along the South Stone and South 6th Avenue corridor. And so the questions are essentially, why is this area being included? And if you want, I'll take a shot at that, Barbara.
Sure.
Okay. So on the map, you can see an area for expansion along, like I said, the South Stone and South 6th Avenue corridors that was not previously included in the Central Business District. One question is this area required to be included for contiguity and compactness reasons? And I think, strictly speaking, no, this area does not have to be included in the expanded Central Business District. From our perspective, why it was included is that this largely higher intensity, largely not single family residential area along the South Stone and South 6th Avenue corridors is really important for the overall revitalization of this portion of downtown in the Central Business District.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I guess, and so some of the questions too, and I think that, this is like a bigger topic of having better criteria, thresholds, metrics that are more transparent, because so that the intent of what I just heard there was more of that this is part of that larger economic development, but it didn't necessarily, that area doesn't necessarily like hit thresholds for, like, it's not necessarily predominantly blighted, but it does fit into this larger goal of the city. And so I think like where I'm coming from in a bigger conversation and maybe expanding beyond this is that having clear metrics from the city would be helpful, because it can help constituents understand why these decisions are being made, and it can help to safeguard from potentially from what some people are viewing as potentially, like I've heard on the Armory Park listserv, for example, I've seen people throw out like redlining is a concern, and I understand that this is not redlining, and that has a different definition, but those are some of the perceptions that people are getting from this because of that ambiguity. And then the same thing with mayor and council being like the discretion of these projects for the G-Plat ultimately getting left up to what the mayor and council deems as desirable. That's a really subjective perspective. And so the concern there is that how these will be used. Maybe we really like what mayor and council are saying today, and we are in line with their desirability index, but I think having something that's a little less ambiguous is what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Amanda. And again, I'm going back to the community engagement piece, and like the conversations we're having today, but also the neighborhood engagement that we're requiring for those incentive programs for the G-Plat 8-year tax abatement. The community is going to be aware of that.
And Barbara, if I could, Amanda, I think you raised some really good points. And I just want to be clear there's nothing preventing any of this conversation from continuing after the designation, and it doesn't really change anything about the conversation, because these are conversations, I think you're right, that they have to be had at the mayor and council level, at the community level, at the, the city level. All of those have to happen. All these conversations have to happen continually, because in essence, although we could come up with any sort of metrics you like, anybody could call them subjective, especially in our current environment. People take facts as subjectively. And so it's important that I think people like yourselves in Armory Park and other community members, it's important to continue that conversation about how you want development to occur. This is one tool to allow that development, but it's important to continue that conversation.
Okay, Roy, I'm going to try to get through a couple of these. First of all, there's one that I think you can answer. How long is the Central Business District designation created to last?
Sure. So, and there's a little confusion, and I think Nick kind of brought that up. And that confusion, unfortunately, was created by the state legislature, not so much our process. But the state legislature, what I tried to make clear in the group chat, have made this definition of central business district, and it only occurs within the GPLET statutes. So in order to have a GPLET incentive in the city, you have to have a central business district. If you have that central business district, that central business district has to be contained within a slum and blighted designation. Once you have those things, then you can have a GPLET. The central business district itself, it again, doesn't have any definition outside of the GPLET statute. The slum and blight designation that it sits in has to be renewed. Beginning this year, it has to be renewed every 10 years.
Every 10 years. Okay.
Yeah, we have to
Thank you.
reevaluate, and we have to go through this process.
Okay, moving on. So Joe had a question. I wonder if Mike or Kevin knows from our GPLET projects that we have had already, have any of those been affordable housing? Can you answer that from our list of 25 projects, or find that answer for us while we go on? And then I'm quickly scrolling.
Barbara, I can speak to that.
Great, thanks, Mike.
So none of the developments that the city of Tucson GPLETs have been involved in have been, by definition, affordable housing to this point. We are working with several other developers that are considering it, and we would absolutely, I mean, if it fits in with their pro forma and their financing. So far, that's what we've heard the most from affordable housing developers, that an 8-year GPLET abatement does not line up with a 15-year or 20-year affordability requirement as required by the state for low-income housing tax credits or the federal programs for their affordable housing programs. So there hasn't been a really big cohesion on that yet. That does not mean that in the future we will not be able to do affordable housing with GPLETs. In fact, we are looking at making that a component or a contribution part of future projects.
Okay, yes, and that's part of our scoring matrix, that we would encourage affordable housing where possible. So there's a question from Shannon, which I like this question. I mean, is there any plan to create outdoor open spaces in the Central Business District to invite the public to gather safely? It would be useful. Actually, again, creating those win-wins, that's another example of the process we went through, for example, with One South Church. So that's more recent in my mind, where down below they're going to offer the the restaurant and sort of that pathway through between the Rendezvous and the office building to kind of open and activate that space for a public pass through that block, and make it a welcoming environment. And so we do look for ways to incorporate that public space, and the project that HSL is looking at, where the Hotel Arizona is being renovated, they're certainly going to play into the plaza at the convention that leads into the convention center, and the renovation of the fountains is going on there, and so they're going to be engaging their folks that come in and around the property at that plaza level with improvements and enhancements there. So yes, I mean, we're always looking for those opportunities.
Barbara?
Yes.
There was also a question about how many community benefit agreements we've had so far. I can answer that so far. And as Kevin pointed out, this is not an agreement where the city is a party to. But there has been one agreement so far with the developers of Union on 6th and with the surrounding neighborhood associations. They would have to share with you, because again, the city is not a party to that. They'd have to share with anybody interested in any details to that. One thing that I can stress that the neighbors really appreciated, and this is why, as Kevin mentioned, we're now considering CBA component to our scoring matrix, is that this provides some, for lack of a better term, leverage for the surrounding neighbors so that they can see the type of development that they would like to see, including protection of historic development, historic properties.
Thanks, Mike. I want to address Paul's question in the chat room. I'm still at 1142 on his question. But in time of inequality, he's asking, how is the proposal of tax giveaways, as he says it, truly benefiting working families? Why would we give developers even more legal cover to pay less taxes? But let me talk about that benefit again, and the fact that, we go back to the economic development purpose of assisting job creation and economic impact. So, when we are helping projects get built that help create jobs, that's payroll impact in the community. That actually helps put money circulating in the community, dollars in the pockets of those that are working in the hospitality or food and beverage industry, those that are working in the area. So you have to consider, those larger and even the indirect impacts that actually do offer an added benefit beyond just the direct revenues to the city that help keep our city strong and help keep providing city services that you all are accustomed to. So that's my answer to that. Not super polished, but that's my answer. There's a question. Again, Betty had asked if there's no evidence of blight, how can it be included? And I go back to that definition of the predominance, and it is not every property. Does Central Business District classification allow for demolition of historic buildings? No, that's not what the Central Business District does. That's a whole...
Okay, stop there for a sec. The slum designation allows for demolition. It's right in the statute. So because the two are tied together, once you get the slum designation, the city can condemn and demolish any property they want. That's right in the statute.
Can I respond to that? Be very careful about that the slum designation, the blight designation allows for condemnation and demolition, because there are additional requirements in that statute beyond what the slum and blight designation. It's a start, but you can't just have a slum and blight designation and then go to demolition, because there's a requirement for condemnation, and then that condemnation requires a whole process. That, and to be clear, that can happen today, right? If there's a public purpose, like on Broadway for right now, there's no slum and blight designation there, but there are condemnations of property on Broadway for the road widening. So slum and blight designation does not equate with condemnation and then demolition. So just be careful that you don't jump to that conclusion.
Okay, thank you, Roy, for that clarification. I am still scrolling. Paula asked, what if a neighborhood does not want to encourage rapid development, but instead prefers incremental development that preserves historical amenities? Again, I think that it is, it's certainly important, right, that, and I know we have a great planning and development services team, and we have a mayor and council that is tuned into protecting its neighborhoods. And so there is going to be a balance of development types, appropriate development, and that's, again, why we have zoning ordinances and regulations around that. So again, be in communication, share your thoughts and goals and visions with your council members, and make sure that they are aware of where you want to go. And
you
how.
know, the CBD is an excellent idea. Okay, it has brought economic development to Tucson, and we love it for that. However, if you go anywhere in the country and the slum designation is given to a particular property or neighborhood, it is bound to be torn down as eminent domain, okay, by any developer that has the correct connection to do it. Now, I think the choice should be given, okay, to the people that you said need to be incorporated into the CBD. And I'm thinking about the corridor from 13th Street to 22nd Street, the 6th Avenue corridor, the Arizona Avenue, the Stone Avenue. I think those folks should be given the option to opt out of being within the CBD, because there is nothing that says, okay, that the next administration that takes over in Tucson, okay, will decide not to use that eminent domain, okay, and that I think is signing off on our future with no guarantees. I mean, I know what you're saying, and I know what the other folks are saying, like Kevin and all that, and Roy. Great, okay. However, okay, in 2 years from now, okay, once the designation is in place, everything is possible. So I think that we're selling out very cheap, okay, our future. And again, like I said, I realize the CBD is an excellent idea. Okay, Renewal didn't do anything for Tucson for many years. Okay, and we've let the downtown run down to nothing for a long time. So okay, let's have a revival, but let's work with the people that live here, that own property over here, and take care of them. That's what I'm saying.
Maurice, thank you. Let me just respond real quickly, because I want to make sure this is clear. Eminent domain is a power that every city has, and the state, and even other governmental special districts. That doesn't mean that the central business district doesn't allow, the central business district in and of itself does not allow for eminent domain any more so than the city already has the power to do. That, you're right, that the city could determine in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years that they want to use that power of eminent domain. That would not change if we either did not have a central business district or did.
Yeah, and I would just add, and I appreciate that, Maurice, as well, that what this does allow for is that the incentive of the 8-year tax abatement to help projects that otherwise wouldn't necessarily go forward. It helps us have one tool in the toolbox for that, which is the financial incentive to offset the challenges that developers have when either they're doing things like restoring a historic property, as Roy mentioned earlier, or again, transitioning a property that is very much in need and is cost prohibitive without an incentive like this. So but I absolutely, I hear the concerns, and I hear the cause for concern. But I think Roy made some good points. Your elected officials are going to work for the best interest of the community, and either choose to use a tool or not a tool for what would be an appropriate response at the time that those projects.
And again, I think the CBD is a very good idea. Okay, don't get me wrong. Okay, I just think that there are some, areas which the CBD is considering annexing, okay, which are extremely controversial, okay, and I don't think that the city should just take it for granted that, just because they put some blue on the map that, everybody is okay with that. Okay, again, like I said, we're signing off our lives for a future, okay, that we don't seem to have some kind of control over, and I don't think it's right. Before any decision is taken by the city on those new boundaries, okay, I think there should be, a consultation with the people, some kind of poll, okay, and to find out who's for it, who's not for it, but just saying that, well, okay, those areas are now going to be in the CBD, I don't think it's right.
Barbara, if I could just real quickly, I wanted to make another point related to redevelopment, eminent domain, demolition, all those sorts of things. The city is also bound by the state to follow the Tucson general plan and any specific plan that applies to the particular area. So in terms of development, those guidelines are also always present for mayor and council and other in terms of approval for any district. So if, for example, the mayor and council decided one day that they wanted to demolish the entire, an entire neighborhood for redevelopment, they couldn't do that even though they have the power of eminent domain. They couldn't do that because unless it fit with the Tucson general plan, and the Tucson general plan generally doesn't allow for that. So there's a whole zoning and land use imprimatur that lays over all of this. So you're still subject to all the land use and zoning requirements and the public processes that go along with those. And in my experience with the city has always had those public processes, and people have vigorously participated throughout all of them.
Thanks, Roy. So Elizabeth asked about how will historic zoning be honored. Again, that's a separate process. The designation's not impacted. She asked also what community benefit agreements have been executed among the projects completed to date. Mike Chakowski mentioned the one on 4th Avenue, and there are others in the works. It says, let's see. Can
I say something here, please?
Yes, Phyllis.
My experience is that the city does not really adhere to the neighborhood plans. I believe that was recently proven on the east side. We've had quite a few things kind of pushed down our throat that we have objected to. So you're making a lot of claims here that history does not back up. Mm. They are not the cooperative entity that we would like to see regarding the neighborhoods. We've had giblets put on us that we haven't wanted, that are inappropriate. They come in and say, we're going to do this. No matter what we say, we might get something adjusted slightly, but we still get stuck with something we don't want in our neighborhood. And it happens repeatedly. So please don't tell us, oh, the city is so concerned about us, because they're not.
Thanks, Phyllis. I appreciate the feedback. Martha,
let me add something to what Mari said.
All right.
Since the focus of the CBD is commercial, and clearly we've all agreed that the corridor that we're talking about, Stone and 6th and Arizona, is historic residential, why not let us opt out?
So, Sloan, if I can take the answer that, Barbara. The difficulty with sort of gerrymandering different areas is it still has to, when it's an expansion area, it has to meet those limitations that the statute requires, which is it can't be more than twice as long as it is. So when you start cutting out holes in it, it sort of doesn't fit that same
configuration.
Configuration. Again, that's not to say that any particular area could be not included in expansion. That's entirely up to the mayor and council. The only thing I will say is that legally, you have to have an area that's sort of, what is it, twice as long as the width or something like that, which is, I don't know why the legislature did that, but they did.
May I jump in here? I'm the president of the Armory Park Neighborhood Association.
Yes.
And I'd like to speak to what Roy just said. there is a hole on either side of the 6 and Stone corridor. If you left that out, it would just be one bigger hole. So I don't see how that even begins to affect width or length. That just seems like a very specious argument to me.
Well, let me explain.
And I would
go ahead, David.
have one other question. In your presentation, you said that this would not affect historic preservation zone requirements. If we could have that in writing as a neighborhood association, we would be a whole lot happier about this, because we are very much afraid that this designation would destroy the historic preservation zone setup that we have at present, and it would affect a full 20% of our historic preservation zone. So
So David, can you speak
that's
to,
very much of a big fear for us.
just so we're clear on that, David, can you speak to how you think it would affect? Legally, I'm saying.
Yes, if somebody comes in and wants to take down a property and build something bigger or whatever that happens to be in the historic preservation zone, the historic preservation zone would say, no, you may not take down that building, regardless of the benefits and improving that it's going to help the city and so forth. So at that point, which is the more important rule, the historic preservation zone or the new designation?
Yeah, the historic preservation zone still has that same power. It doesn't change with the designation of the CBD or something.
Okay, and so my other half of that question was, can we as a neighborhood have that in writing as part of this whole process?
That if you want to, and Barbara, you can give out my email if you'd like. David, if you want to just put that down in email. I
would be happy to put that in email.
Yeah, and then we can answer it more fully.
I wonder if I might say a word. I've put a few things in writing, but I think I need to kind of summarize. First of all, on behalf of APNA, the Neighborhood Association, I undertook the project of trying to organize our effort here, and you have or will see the product of my work over the last few days. So I want to say why APNA took the position it did. First of all, you, Roy, I believe it was, and Barbara, at the last meeting said there would be no option to amend what you have proposed. That leaves us no choice but to fall back to mayor and council and to try to get this defeated. So I can promise you that we will be taking a very aggressive position on this, and the position will force us to attack the entire CBD because there's no way for us to get you to reevaluate the assessment you've made, which we regard to be seriously in error. So we just don't have any choice on that. Now, you've relied a lot on how good the officials are going to make decisions and how helpful that will be for the community. And I have no reason to doubt that. But the good faith of current officials is entirely irrelevant over the long haul, because when new officials come and others go, no official is bound by the actions and policies of previous officials. Every council and mayor can change the rules anytime they choose to. You keep talking about the values of eliminating blight. Well, there is no blight in the area that you want to include from within Armory Park in the CBD. So we take absolutely strong exception to that. And you've left us no choice, but it's one of those things where we have to, excuse me, kind of go to the trenches. I'm 77 years old. My neighborhood is 150 years old. So we take the long view of these things, and we cannot allow policies to be implemented without strong resistance that are going to endure long past all of the people in this Zoom session being involved. So I just want you to know without any attack on anybody's character, that this was a bad report. It's a bad action because it was not coordinated with anybody in advance, or certainly not with the Armory Park Neighborhood Association Board. And as a result, we will strongly oppose it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Ken. Just so I can clarify, Barbara, I think, Ken, what you're referring to is you opposed the findings of condition. You wanted to amend the findings of condition, and you have every right to oppose the designation with mayor and council. And the findings of condition are what they base what they do. And anybody is welcome to present alternative views or any other perspective to mayor and council for them to make the ultimate decision.
If your legal advice was, as I understood it, and is correct, their choice will be to accept or reject.
They can accept, reject, or modify.
Well, we will certainly hope for modification, but as I'm cautioning you right now, we don't feel like we have any choice but to object to the entire thing. And we are starting our campaign to rouse the other residential neighborhoods.
And that's entirely available to you. And I just want to be clear what you're asked, what you might want to ask for mayor and council. If you have a modification, you might want to let them know.
Well, we know what we want to ask. No more stone corridor from 14th till 19th.
And so thank you, Ken. And so Roy, what that does, and I appreciate that feedback, and we're hearing that there's many of you on this call, on this meeting today expressing similar. Roy, what that does is it creates a different boundary configuration if we were to remove areas. And that's, Ken, what I did say on Wednesday's meeting. And so we would have to, and I don't know if we can do that now, but we would have to look into how that changes the configuration and what it does to the overall proposed expansion boundaries.
I'm sure you could look into it, but you're going to find that there is proposed CBD to our west. There is proposed CBD to our east. Yeah. So removing us from the middle does absolutely nothing to the exterior dimensions of the proposed district.
Well, it creates as Roy put it, a donut hole, because the areas do have to be contiguous, but then they're also constrained. So we will take a look at it. I can assure you of that, and then we will have a response so that mayor and council is informed as to how the Armory Park neighborhood issue, of exclusion would impact the district and what would have to happen or how it would change it going forward. So I appreciate that.
And again, I just want to state that the CBD is an extremely good thing for Tucson, okay? But at the same token, the people that live here need to be listened to.
Yes, thank you, Maurice. There are a lot of comments about the affordable housing and how, that could be used. Again, I also add development, the city doesn't do all the development, right? The private sector brings much of our commercial development and housing development to us. So we need great developers as well. So again, it's our job to, again, promote and have the tools available to attract that kind of development. So these are all part of this central business district, and the GPLET tool are all tools to help attract that kind of development. I'm scrolling, it says in my little box, 150 new messages, and it is 12:30. So what I'm going to propose is that, we will take, I've had a team of people watching all of these questions. We will take a look at all of these. Kevin, is there anything in particular you think we need to respond to that is unique and different before we close?
We've received a lot of great comments in the chat, and I think that to the extent practical, between what Roy has contributed and what you have stated over the past few minutes, we have addressed most, if not every single one of the questions in the chat. So I think we're in pretty good shape, Barbara, and we're going to do our best to go back through all of this If there is anything that we find we have not specifically responded to, be obviously happy to follow up, and we can include all of this in our summary report, which we're going to provide to the council.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I do see now as a lot of answers that have been given. And again, I'll reiterate that September 9th is the anticipated council consideration date, but we will take this feedback and share some comments with our mayor and council as to the feedback received during these meetings. And I appreciate the attendance because it does help drive better decisions. So with that—
May I ask a question?
Yes, please. And if you would let us know who this is, I see a phone number.
This is John Burr from Armory Park as well. I want to take a little different tact here. When mayor and council did the original CBD in 2012, it had to notify all 18 neighborhoods that were included and notify every property owner. When I spoke to you last June in 2019 and offered you the out of only doing the IID area of South Stone to get your continuity, you said, well, we're going to have a full process. We're going to talk to every neighborhood. We're going to seek input. And now you've got 2 meetings that are not well advertised with a done deal map going to mayor and council in 3 weeks with no opportunity for anyone to participate. And now you've glommed onto 6 more neighborhoods. And I want to know how a GIPLET with an average capitalization of $5.7 million is actually going to help the minority communities that you're now moving into.
Thanks, John. So it looks like I'm getting to the bottom of these questions. All right. There are some that have discussed. I know Stephen has talked about, he's messaging me, but has shared, some information. These are all comments. I'm just trying to get to the bottom. Okay, so I feel like a lot of people were responding to each other. Some have some comments about horrible history with great developers. Again, yes.
Could you please respond to what John said?
John's question about
he covered a lot of ground. Would you?
He covered a lot of ground, but he seemed to recollect a conversation that we had that engaged last year over the IID and this process, and I would not be able to recollect exactly what went on in that conversation because those are 2 very different programs. But the issue of notifying neighborhoods is actually not a requirement of the central business district process, but is one that we chose to do. So having these community meetings and trying to do outreach and to be transparent was the goal. So all we can do is move forward from here. I can't go back and recollect what was said or promised. I'm not of the typical mind to make promises that I can't keep, so that's my response. I don't know what the answer is on the minority, how it affects minority communities, because the goal is to bring quality development. That's what we would do responsibly, and projects that have benefit, that have positive impact to the community and not negative impact. So that's my answer for John.
But we weren't included in this process. Regardless of what transpired in the past, the first I heard, I didn't know about the meeting Wednesday. The first I heard about this was a message on our listserv on Thursday.
Right.
So we are not being included. We have not been included right now, here and now in this process.
Well, this is part of the process, and I apologize that you feel we didn't get that to you sooner.
The current
Barbara.
CBD has the protection of the infill incentive district and other overlays that ensure neighborhood participation. These new expansion areas have none of these protections, nor neither a conversation about them. That is the problem with the expansion area. We have no problem with renewal of the current CBD. It's protected, but these expansion areas are an egregious take.
Okay.
I want to be clear. Are you saying that they don't have zoning protections?
They don't have overlay protections that ensure a process that guarantees all historic buildings are retained and a public process element to them. They are just underlying zoning, and your map has been used to do zoning rather than used to create this map.
That's legally incorrect. The overlays, the zoning, and all the things that are present in the current CBD and the expanded areas will stay. There's nothing about zoning related to the CBD or the slum and blight designation. So I just want to be clear on that.
As happens all too often, the city is again trying to cram something down our throats without much input. You've already planned everything. You've got all this lined up, and now we're finding out about it at the last minute. How can we possibly be agreeable to something you're trying to force down our throats, which destroys our neighborhood?
Thanks, Phyllis, for your comments. And you have those choices and those options. So I think we're going to wrap up now, and we're going to request that any additional comments, please send to us by email. I think there's some strong emotions out there. I've seen comments from Debbie and others that are strong, and I appreciate the feedback. It's sometimes difficult, but it's important. And I want you to know that, yes, and we're going to need to keep it brief, Raul, but absolutely.
Barbara, I also have my hand up.
In addition to the YouTube meeting, can you post the chats for the public record as well?
I am not sure that this function, I'm not 100% sure that I have a recorded chat.
Zoom will usually shoot out the text chat to the meeting organizer after it's over with.
Yeah, it depends if it's in webinar or meeting, and we're in a meeting function, I think.
Hi, Barbara. This is Elaine. I have my hand up whenever appropriate. Can you call on me, please?
You're welcome to go now, Elaine.
Great. Hi, everyone. This is Elaine Becker, Chief of Staff for Mayor Regina Romero. And we're hearing everyone's comments, and I think it would be helpful for the audience and the public to know what other council members, staff are on the call. So myself, as well as another colleague of mine from the mayor's office, we were on Wednesday's call, and Chief of Staff for Councilmember Santa Cruz, Liz, and her staff were on Wednesday's call, and they're again on today's. If there's any other council members, staff on the call, I think it would be helpful for the audience to know that. And just, one, nuance for the mayor that, we would like to get on the record to the question that came up earlier.
Elaine, yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
These meetings were not required, but the mayor and council member Santa Cruz specifically went to Barbara and Kevin and staff and said they would like to have some public meetings. If additional public meetings, additional community conversation is needed, that's the elected official's role to hear that from you. So please let us know. But I think it's, we all did our best in working with staff as a team. We are a team with economic initiatives, and Barbara and Kevin and Roy. We're a city team, and we all worked very, very diligently to publicize and notice these meetings. They were in the Neighborhood Nugget, they were on websites, they were sent out to different stakeholders, user groups. So yeah, we really appreciate the comments, but it is fair to note that we did want to make it a point to hear from the community and you all And that's why we're having these public meetings.
Thanks, Elaine. I appreciate that. So
Let me ask, if
Raul,
after the,
and
if
I'm going
after
to,
this,
again, I
excuse
apologize.
me,
I'm going to go to
after this
Raul.
meeting,
Thank
is there
you.
going to be any opportunity for anything to change? So public meetings that are simply to inform us of what the government has decided to do are not meaningful public meetings in the way the typical citizen would understand them.
Perhaps it would be helpful for you to describe the efforts that you have made to meet with local residents to get their input. I'm sure they all have great ideas about how to improve their neighborhoods. So maybe if you talk about that, about some of the positive things you've done to engage the neighborhoods, to engage the residents, that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Herschella. And I'll respond to that in a moment. I want to be sure Raul gets his question in.
Thank you. So, you know, I've been looking at this whole Central Business District for a long time, and what I've noticed is that, and I know that you have to meet the state definition in terms of blighted, but my sense is, you know, the map is really gerrymandered to meet that definition. So you're including lower income areas, like, you know, and now I see the extension into the southern district of Tucson and South Park, and some in terms of close to Barrio Sin Nombre, and then you're going up north. But honestly, what I've seen in terms of, because you have a pairing of the G-Plex along with the CBD, and so you have one needs the other. And what I've seen is that the developers basically cherry pick locations, and so all the development that's taken place since 2012 has been primarily in the downtown area. And what's happened, the outcome has been that it's hurt minority communities, the barrios around the downtown area, where it has increased the level and velocity of gentrification. So our barrios are changing drastically. And so one of the things that's really needed is kind of low-income housing, but I don't see that. And I think there was a recognition of the 25 projects that have happened that none have, because for the developer, they don't pencil out. But for the neighborhoods, and I'm talking about neighborhoods of color, it doesn't pencil out for us either, because what happens is our property taxes go up. And as that happens, then, and there's a lot of interest in those areas from developers to buy homes. And so you end up driving residents out overall over time. And I think that's the fallacy of this project. I think the intent is good, and it'd be nice if in fact it delivered to the communities that are the most needy. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. I appreciate that insight. All right, we are, oh, Herschella, I said about and this is the final question and response. You had asked about what we've done so far. I can tell you that I do a lot of meetings to community groups, albeit probably more with businesses and commercial and nonprofit groups. We've been doing, even since COVID-19, weekly webinars, but I'm on 3 or 4 different meetings and presentations. I've been with Rotary groups and other neighborhood, that kind of organization. So my team over the past year has been out responding on different projects and with community meetings on somewhat project specific. So to answer your question, we do our best to be visible and available, and I want everyone to know that we can be approached and engaged. We'd love to participate and partner more frequently, so please do reach out to us. But to your point, we probably haven't been everywhere, and there's certainly residents and neighborhoods we have not met with. So I appreciate that. And again, we're going to wrap things up. We're going to invite you to send additional questions. My email is in the inbox, and then the slideshow and the recording will be posted again by Monday. You can see Wednesday's recording and all the documents there at connecttucson.com already. And if you have trouble finding that, again, send me an email directly. But you should be able to, even in our website, use the search function, and it will, and if you enter Central Business District, it will bring up all of the documents. It will point you to the right pages to be on the website to read about the Central Business District renewal and expansion. So with that, thank you very much for attending, and please share with others and keep engaging, and we'll talk again very soon.